Okay, I'm beginning to wonder if I'm ever going to get to the point where I'm not going to feel sick before I do a live stream. But, feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And I've been compelled this morning to kind of come and talk to you about when I left my role as SENCO, because actually last week celebrates, I don't know, marks 10 years ago that I resigned from my role of SENCO in a primary school that I absolutely love working in, the primary school that my children were attending. I loved the staff team. I loved the job. I've done it for 6 years. I was really, really, really good at the job. And I just got to the point one day where I just thought, I can't do this anymore. And I've never really talked about this on a live, partly, I guess, because I thought that, maybe people wouldn't be interested. But I think also because I've been scared to tell the story, because for a long time, I thought that not what I had done was wrong, but I saw that resignation as a weakness, as all of my friends and colleagues were staying in school, and the fact that I couldn't sustain it any longer. I'd not long got my diagnosis of dyslexia. And I felt like the fact that I couldn't sustain that role was my fault. It was the fact that I wasn't managing life well. And I think when I look back now, I realized that that wasn't the case at all. And I want to share those experiences because I wrote a post yesterday on LinkedIn about exactly this, and it's resonated with quite a few people. I've received quite a few messages this morning from people saying they totally relate and get where I'm coming from. So I'm going to be brave and I'm going to talk to you about it. So why did I resign from my role of SENCO? Well, as I've just said, I'd not long got my diagnosis of dyslexia. And the thing about neurodiversity is we can literally achieve anything we want to achieve, but sometimes it is the sustainability of that and being able to sustain that effort. And actually, for me, working in a school, now I've been distanced from it from 10 years, I realized that I was not working with my brain. I was working against my brain. I was working against my strengths, if you like. So understandably, whenever you work in a school or when you work for a corporate company, things have to be done in a certain way. There are certain hoops that you need to jump through. There are certain things that have to be done. I get that. There is always going to be red tape. But for me, lots of that red tape and lots of those ways of doing things didn't allow me to use my creative energy, didn't allow me to use my gut instinct and my intuition. And actually a lot of supporting pupils with SEN. So yes, it is about evidence-based approaches, but sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes it's about knowing what an individual child or an individual parent might need at that particular time. So there was that going on for me in terms of that new diagnosis of dyslexia and me trying to make sense of that. The other thing from a really practical point of view is in order to do that SENCO role, I was hugely, hugely, hugely over delivering. The amount of hours I was having to put into that job to be able to complete everything, to be able to meet the deadlines, to be able to keep on top of everything was enormous. It was actually having an impact on my own emotional well-being and on my family's life and on my children. And I honestly felt like everybody else's children and the school were getting the best of me. And I was just getting, my family were just having the burnt out, tired bit that was left. I personally feel like being a SENCO is a really, really, really tricky job. And I can talk openly about this now and not feel like I'm a failure. I feel like the type of people that become SENCOs are passionate about making a difference to pupils' lives with SEND, pupil and parents' lives, trying to make it easier. And it is very difficult to not become emotionally involved in that. And again, I think particularly as a neurodivergent person, you know, we really want to people please. We don't want people to not like us. We want to try and keep everybody happy. You know, we don't always enjoy confrontation. And actually that role of SENCO is exhausting because you're constantly negotiating. You're negotiating between the parent and the class teacher, potentially knowing that what's happening isn't right in the classroom, but you're kind of, there's only so much you can do as a SENCO who's advising the teacher from the outside. Maybe you're negotiating with SLT because you need budget or you need some funding to purchase a particular resource that you know is going to benefit from, you know, a certain amount of people. Then you're bargaining and you're kind of working with local authorities that are in a similar situation. You know, they've got really restricted budgets and really restricted resources. So it's a role that is really challenging emotionally for so many reasons. So I made the decision that I was going to resign from this job. Now, people around me at the time, honestly, I don't think anybody particularly supported me other than my husband, which is ironic because we had literally just moved into our dream house. Like, we had bust the gut for the last 15, 16 years, kind of looking. We really wanted to live in a property that was by the sea, and we'd made the decision that I would work part-time all through the children being little. My youngest had literally just started school and was in school full-time. I'd gone full-time. And we had literally just moved house and secured this property that was reliant on both of us working full-time. And for many of my family members, I was the first person to have got a degree. I had this professional job. I had a really good salary. And it didn't really make sense to anybody why I had made this kind of decision to walk away from this job that A, I was potentially really good at, B, was kind of creating this really, that had like a guaranteed salary. You know, without that, potentially we were going to have to move house. We were going to have to put our house back on the market. Nobody really understood it. And whilst people on the surface were kind of supportive and were like, well, I'm sure you're going to make whatever you're going to do work, because I should say I resigned with nothing to go to. So I was a qualified dyslexia assessor, and I'd actually been made redundant from that 3 years prior, which is why I'd ended up kind of going back to this role of SENCO. So I knew I had that specialist dyslexic qualification, and I knew that it was a possibility for me to go independent and to build a practice doing that. I'd done all of that training, done the assessor's qualification, 6 months pregnant with my third. And then whilst my third was finished it when she was 6 months old. So I knew that I had that qualification. And at the time I was thinking, if I can just do a handful of assessments every month to just cover the mortgage and to just keep us afloat, that will be enough. And it became apparent quite quickly that the business was going to grow quite quickly, and it has grown and it's plateaued, and I'm going to come to that in a minute. But what was really interesting is why lots of people on the surface were kind of smiling and waving and going, oh, you know, we wish you luck. I also know that there were a lot of whispers in the staff room in particular, like, oh, we'll give her 6 months and she'll be back. Like, she'll never make it work because parents don't have the money to pay for dyslexia assessments, because schools don't have the budget to pay for dyslexia assessments. It will never work. Like, she will give it, we'll give it 6 months and she'll be back. And I know those whispers were happening. And, you know, I hit a year, and I can honestly say it wasn't easy, but I didn't look back. And 10 years on, I am now kind of have this big following on social media, and I truly have never, ever, ever looked back for many, many, many reasons. Now, in the last couple of years, I think it would be fair to say that my business has massively plateaued, and I felt really, really stuck. And since January, I've been doing some real deep soul searching as to why that might be. And unfortunately, it does come back to me and my mindset, because I think, particularly when you've worked in education, there is this real sense that you can't charge very much because parents don't have money, and why should parents have to pay for it, and schools don't have money. And at heart, I am like a huge socialist in as much as I'm about equity. I'm about, I really am about, I want to help everybody. The trouble is, you can't help everybody. That's been my really big learning curve in the last couple of weeks. Well, last couple of months, is in trying to help everybody. I'm kind of back into that situation where I was when I was SENCO, where I'm literally just scraping the surface of making a difference in terms of the dyslexic world. And yes, while it's brilliant that we are all in our own little corners, and as long as we're doing the best we can and making a difference, that's brilliant. But I feel like, for me personally, I feel quite frustrated because I feel like the business is really stuck, and I feel like I'm now in this cycle of all I'm doing is mostly assessment, which is brilliant, because don't get me wrong, the diagnosis, the assessment reports and the diagnosis make a huge difference to the people that I am helping do that with. But I want to have a bigger impact. And actually, if I'm being really honest with you, and this is really brave kind of sharing this, if I'm really honest with you, writing the dyslexic reports drain me. I can do it. I've trained myself to do it. I've worked really, really hard to do it. I've got really good systems in place. I've got an incredible proofreader that kind of double checks everything for me. That is a big cost whenever I do an assessment, but I'm cool with that because it's got to be right. The bit that I really love, and the bit where I can really make a difference, my favorite part is with my assessment service. We do the assessment, you get the report and the recommendations, and then I do a Zoom call where I talk through the report with the parents and the young person, if the young person wants to be there. And those calls are supposed to be 30 minutes. They are never 30 minutes because, well, A, because as you can tell, I can talk, but B, because I just love being able to empower and talk to the parents about the conversations that they need to have with school, because I know how to do that, because I've been a parent of a child with dyslexia. I'm dyslexic myself. I know the role of the teacher. I know the role of the SENCO. So I love having the conversation with the parents so I can massively empower them on how to support their child. But I also love working with the child or the adult or whoever it is I've assessed, the young person, to give them tips and strategies on how they're going to be able to manage their dyslexia. And the thing is, that small amount of time is just not long enough. But it's the bit that really sets me alight and the bit that I am really, really good at. So 10 years into my business, so it's 10 years since I resigned this week. I actually set the business up in the January after that. I did have to do a little bit of supply in September while I was kind of getting all of the ducks in a row. Not that my ducks are ever in a row, but I did have to do a little bit of supply. So January it actually marks 10 years of Another Way Round Limited being in business. And those of you that follow me now probably don't even know me as Another Way Round. You know me as at Dyslexic Life of Jo Rees. And I've decided that actually I'm going to shift direction again. I've done it before and I can do it again. And it's a super courageous move. But because I've done it before, I know that I can get there. So, all through lockdown, I did tuition. And again, that needs to be individual. I am going to look at coaching and supporting people. So I've already started to do that through my Own Your Dyslexia program, which is online and on demand now. And actually, if you want details on that, drop me a message. I've also got on Wednesday a free webinar called Proven Strategies to Manage Your Dyslexia, where I'm actually going to share all my hints, tips and secrets on how I manage dyslexia, so you can get to know me a bit more then. But I've created the online Own Your Dyslexia program, which is 4 pillars, which talks through, really, it's how I kind of came to terms with managing my dyslexia myself. I am imminently, and I mean imminently, I'm just waiting for the course content, which is all over this wall here, to come back from my proofreader. And I'm actually going to be launching an empowerment course for kids. Young people, actually, between the ages of 8 and 18. that is going to be a game changer in terms of improving mindset when it comes to dyslexia. And it's quite funny. I recently, so I've created it all, and every now and again I kept asking my own children for for advice, or kind of, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Because as I've said before, all three of my children have got dyslexic or ADHD profiles, or both. And I shared it with my son at the beginning of last week, and he was like actually really quite interested. And we got to the end of the course and he went, "Mum, that is like everything you did with us." And I was like, "Yes, I'm glad you've said that." And he went, "But he said, I manage my dyslexia so well." And I was like, "Yes, I know, but because we've done like all of these things, and I wanted to create a program that was accessible to parents and to young people, kind of using what we had learned together, like me and my children and my husband had kind of learned together on navigating kind of dyslexia, so that they could be super successful too." So that is imminently about to be launched, which is very, very exciting. And the other area which I'm thinking that I really want to go into is interesting, because I've realized in the last week that I have supported 5 of my colleagues that I used to work with in leaving education and setting up their own businesses. And I have done that. I haven't been paid to do that. I've done that because they're my colleagues and because they've seen me do it. So, you know, I've kind of shared everything I've learned on the way, kind of and empowered them. And I've actually naturally coached them through that process. You know, a couple of them have set up as tutors. One's doing something completely different and is running an art business now. One of them is a childminder. And the other one literally just dips in and out of work whenever they need a little bit of money. You know, they just do the odd kind of little bit of consultancy. So I've realized that actually I have got some skills to support people, which leads me to my final point in this rather long live, that so often people with dyslexia don't value their skill set. Like, we don't value our worth. And I think often if we come from education, that's because there's this real kind of taboo thing where you can't charge for that because parents can't afford it. And everybody should be entitled to that. And I kind of get that. But by trying to help everybody or water something down, that's not necessarily helping anybody. And I think it's okay to charge for what you are brilliant at and what you are really good at. And this is just a little tip that I want to give you. Rather than think about it as money, I want you to think about it as an energy exchange. So how much energy have you put into that product or that service that you're delivering? And what is that energy worth? Because it is worth something. It is worth something to the person that you are supporting, but it's also worth something to you. Because if we're constantly over delivering and overcompensating, or we've got really, really, really low prices, what happens is we end up getting to the point where we're completely overrun, and we're almost back in that same cycle that we were in school or in the corporate industry, where we're literally just on this little like treadmill, hamster wheel of kind of going through the motions of providing a service, of kind of ticking boxes. And as an independent provider, that isn't me. So to sum up then, in this rather epically long life, I've shared with you why I left my role as SENCO and some of the issues around that. I've shared with you that, you know, I rather courageously walked away from a job that I loved, from people I loved, but to be true to myself and to kind of build this business and 100% back myself. And I guess my message to you is if you are thinking that you are in a job that doesn't work with your dyslexia, it's working against it, or if you feel like you're running a business and you're really struggling to make ends meet because you think it needs to be delivered in a certain way, or you think that is all you can do, I just want you to question, how could you do it differently? Like, how else could you kind of generate income, or how could you tweak what you're delivering to be able to have a bigger impact, but more importantly, to free yourself up to be more creative and to get that better work-life balance, which is likely why you left your job in the first place. So lots of food for thought there. Once again, if you've managed to get to the end, thank you very much. I hope you found this live to be helpful. Please do comment below if you have. But all that is left for me to say is have a super great rest of Monday. And yeah, no doubt I'll be back soon at some point to talk more about my experiences.